The Indianapolis Colts saw everything they needed to see and more against their matchup against the Houston Texans. We're going to cover all that and more on what the good news is and what maybe the bad news is coming up on this video. What's going on? It's Elijah from Sports Talk Indy, where we cover all things Colts every single day. And today I got the opportunity to do a play-by-play coverage of the game over on Bring the Juice's channel. But the Colts saw what they needed to see. And I think that if you're one of the toxic Colts fans who are already calling for guys' heads, you're not going to want to watch this video. Because this video isn't about all of the negative things we could take away, although I do want to cover some of them. But the main key takeaway is that Anthony Richardson is everything we hoped he would be. And he's everything we expected him to be. He's a guy who can make explosive plays, dynamic plays, who can make every throw that you need him to make, but he's also not as developed as you would expect. He's still the NFL's youngest starting quarterback by a matter of several months, and this is his second NFL season. He's younger than Jaden Daniels. He's younger than Will Levis. He's younger than C.J. Stroud. He's younger than Caleb Williams. He's younger than Bo Nix. Younger than a majority of these guys. The only NFL quarterback who could be in a starting position who he's not quite younger than is Drake May. And so you're talking about a guy who is still the youngest NFL quarterback. This is only his fifth NFL career start, and he had completions of 57, of 60, and of 65, and of 54 yards. 3 completions, all of which were bombs to Ashton Dulin and Alec Pierce twice. The Colts saw what they needed to see from him, and I think that there was a little bit of he was pressured quite a bit. I mean, in that game, it was kind of actually extraordinary how much he had to deal with the pressure, given the caliber of offensive line that he's working with, and ordinarily he has. But today, I mean, it was just a different beast, dealing with pressure on a majority of plays, and honestly not having the run game to the full capacity. But right now we're talking about Anthony Richardson. That's what I want to talk about. Anthony Richardson had over 200 yards passing, had over 56 yards rushing. He looked good. He was sliding when he needed to slide. The one interception that's going to go against him, I think, is it's terrible that it's going against him, because it was clearly an on-target ball, and something was up with this turf today, guys. I mean, this is the Helix turf. This is supposed to be the next big thing, and yet there were guys slipping and sliding around. C.J. Stroud slipped twice on the 50-yard line. Anthony Richardson slipped on that bomb to Alec Pierce. So obviously, Kylan Granson, don't blame him for slipping, but it is interesting that the 2 interceptions that Anthony Richardson's had, one in the preseason and one in the regular season, have both come at the fault of Kylan Granson. Whatever, not mad about it, but it is definitely interesting to note. But I think the Colts saw what they needed to see. Anthony Richardson is the leader that you hope him to be. He's the culture leader that you need him to be. He had some really good dots. Obviously, there were some missed throws. There was the missed throw to Adonai Mitchell. There was actually 2 missed throws to Adonai Mitchell, one of which was off. His hand went off of the helmet of Danielle Hunter. He went on to say that he's not injured. He's not dealing with any sort of soreness from that. That's like right before he went on to throw the 50-yard bomb to Alec Pierce, where Alec Pierce boxed out Jimmy Ward. But it was a good game for Anthony Richardson. I think there's so many more highs than there were lows. His running ability is still second to none as far as QBs in the NFL. He has all the juke that you need him to have, but he also trucked like 3 guys in this game, including that touchdown run. He had 3 total touchdowns today, adding to his higher touchdown. He has a rushing touchdown in every single start that he's had so far in his NFL career. So they saw everything they needed to see from him. Here is where I want to focus a lot of attention, is that this run defense is surprisingly bad. This Colts team was top 10 in the league as far as rushing defense goes. I mean, not allowing rushing yards. And yet, for some God knows what reason, they were unable to stop Joe Mixon and company today. Now, that being said, that same unit that was bottom 5 in the league as far as QB pressures go, they were 27th in the league last year in QB pressures, got 4 sacks on C.J. Stroud. They were constantly in his face. And if C.J. Stroud was almost any other quarterback besides Patrick Mahomes or maybe Lamar Jackson and possibly Kyler Murray, there's only 3 other quarterbacks that could do what C.J. Stroud did today and be able to actually find a play when there literally is none. I think this Colts defensive line is going to be really good if they can figure out the run defense. And honestly, a lot of it was missed tackles. A lot of it was they would even blow up a play and just have guys in the right spot and just miss tackles. Nick Cross had quite a bit of tackles. I don't have that stat of how many he had officially in front of me, but he had quite a bit of tackles. And let me pull up that stat real quick. Today's game, he had 14 tackles in today's game. That's great for Nick Cross. That's terrible for your defense because that means that he is getting past the first and second line of defense of that front seven, which is supposed to be the best, one of the best in football. And it was. It was good on the pass, but it was terrible on the run. Joe Mixon ran with a reckless abandon today, which is just so surprising. Even when Dameon Pierce got the ball, it was an unbelievable showcase. And I think that this is where, if I were to put myself in the shoes of the Indianapolis Colts front office, at this point it's too late to sign. And honestly, you don't need to. It's your front seven. But you got to scheme better. And I think that the thing that I think was the issue for the Colts was the guys that burned them the most, aside from Nico Collins, who had a fantastic game, who has been like the Colts equivalent of what T.Y. Hilton was to the Texans, Nico Collins is becoming for the Colts. But what we're talking about here is the guys that really had a big impact, which were Joe Mixon. There's not a lot of film on him being this explosive as a runner. And I think that he really didn't have this experience when he was with the Bengals. He had a few good games, but they weren't near. He would kind of do this like stutter step and then just go. And I think that was both surprising and it was something that I don't think that the Colts had an adequate understanding of how good Mixon was going to be in that spot. And so I think that that's going to be something that coming the next part of the season when the Colts are going to be on the road against Houston, that they're going to be able to kind of game plan hopefully a little bit better against and kind of clean this up. This is a team that started their starters in, I think, a total of 2.5 quarters in this season, in the preseason. So this is a team that's still very underdeveloped, still very young. But the high notes, I want to talk about a couple high notes, a couple players that really stood out. Jalen Jones had a fantastic game. He had only a couple of times where he allowed a couple catches, but as far as coverage goes, he stopped that deep ball to Tank Dell and really closed the gap, got a hand in, and almost came down with the interception. And then the same thing on the play to Nico Collins, which was just an unbelievable throw and catch by C.J. Stroud to Nico Collins. But he was on him. He had a hand on him. He had a hand deep in him, or hand on the football. And so he was, Jalen Jones had a good game. Juju Brents had an almost interception that really should have been. Honestly, it was a sack attempt by Kwity Paye, I believe, was on the pressure on that specific play. And then Juju Brents came down with what should have been an interception, ended up not being an interception because of his toe came down, but then his heel came down out of bounds. Just a heartbreaking thing because you really wanted to see him get it. But as far as it goes, and this was for the Colts defense, the pass coverage wasn't bad, and the pass rush wasn't bad. It was actually very good. But the run defense is going to use some work. But as far as offensively goes, we've seen what we needed to see now. Anthony Richardson is the guy. It's just going to take some time to really iron out all of the kinks and all of the things. But as far as like his playmaking ability, it's almost second to none. This is a guy who just with experience is going to continue to get better and better. And I think that teams are going to, when you game plan against the run for the Colts, they're going to get you with the pass. And when you game plan for the pass, they're going to get you with the run. The guys that really showed out today the most are Alec Pierce and Ashton Doolin, two guys who, as far as like, I was even talking about potentially not even making the roster or elite, or not maybe even getting cut, but maybe being trade packages for both of these guys. And both these guys proved me wrong in a substantial fashion. I'll be first to say I was wrong about Alec Pierce. Today showed me enough to believe in Alec Pierce that he has a spot on this team, especially in the seasons moving forward. So there's a lot of good and definitely a lot that the Colts need to work on, but this is a young team. This is a second-year head coach, a second-year offensive coordinator, and I think that the Colts are going to get it, and they're going to be really good for the remainder of the season. And I'm very excited of what I saw from this Indianapolis Colts team.